In the vast emptiness of space where stars blinked like distant lanterns and planets drifted silently in their orbits, a fleet of alien ships moved with purpose. These were not explorers seeking knowledge or peacekeepers on a mission of goodwill. They were the Vraxians, an aggressive, warlike species known for their insatiable hunger for resources. For centuries they had roamed the galaxy, conquering weaker civilizations and stripping their worlds bare. To them, every planet was just another stepping stone toward greater power. The Vraxian fleet consisted of sleek, black ships that glided through the void like shadows. Their hulls shimmered faintly under the light of nearby stars, reflecting an eerie beauty that masked their deadly intent. At the center of this armada was the flagship Zorathis, commanded by Xylar, a ruthless leader whose reputation for cruelty preceded him. Under his command, countless races had fallen to ruin, their homelands reduced to barren wastelands. As the fleet approached Earth's solar system, Xylar leaned back in his chair, studying the holographic display hovering above the control panel. The blue-green orb floating in the distance seemed almost innocent, its swirling clouds and vibrant oceans hinting at life but nothing more. Scans revealed sprawling cities teeming with activity, yet no sign of advanced technology or organized defenses. It was a primitive world, chaotic and divided, ripe for conquest. "This will be easy," Xylar muttered, turning to his second-in-command Kryn. His voice carried a note of disdain, as though he already considered the mission beneath him. "Look at them, fighting among themselves, wasting resources, polluting their own planet. They won't even know what hit them." Kryn nodded hesitantly, though something about the situation made him uneasy. He glanced at the scanner readings again, frowning slightly. There was something off, something they couldn't quite explain. But before he could voice his concerns, Xylar barked out orders, dismissing any doubts. The Vraxians didn't dwell on uncertainties. Hesitation meant weakness, and weakness was punishable by death. With a collective hum of engines, the fleet descended closer to Earth. From their vantage point in orbit, the aliens watched as humanity went about its daily routines. Oblivious to the danger looming above, cars zipped along highways, planes streaked across skies, and satellites orbited lazily overhead. To the Vraxians, it all looked so fragile, so temporary. But then, without warning, something extraordinary happened. High above the Earth, a section of the sky began to shimmer. It started subtly, like heat waves rising from asphalt on a summer day. Then, slowly but unmistakably, the air seemed to split apart, as if reality itself was tearing open. A deep rumble echoed through space, vibrating through the hulls of the Vraxian ships. Crew members exchanged nervous glances, unsure of what they were witnessing. None of their instruments could detect anything unusual until it was too late. From the rift emerged massive structures unlike anything the Vraxians had ever seen. Towering starships rose into view, their surfaces gleaming with polished metal and pulsating with energy. Each vessel was enormous, dwarfing the largest ships in the Vraxian fleet. Weapons bristled along their sides, glowing faintly with latent power. These weren't mere transports or supply ships. They were war machines built for one purpose: destruction. Xylar's eyes widened in disbelief. His hands clenched tightly around the armrests of his chair, knuckles turning white. What kind of primitive civilization hid such monstrous creations? And why hadn't their scans detected anything? Before anyone could react, one of the human star destroyers broadcasted a message. The voice that came through was calm, measured, and chillingly authoritative. It spoke in perfect galactic standard, the universal language used by most intelligent species in the galaxy. "Attention, unidentified vessels. You have entered restricted territory. Leave now, or face annihilation." Silence fell over the bridge of the Zorathis. Every crew member froze, staring at each other in shock. This wasn't supposed to happen. Primitive worlds didn't issue ultimatums. They begged for mercy, pleaded for survival. Yet here was Earth daring to challenge them. Xylar gritted his teeth, anger boiling beneath the surface. How dare these humans speak to him like equals? He slammed his fist onto the console, startling everyone around him. "They think they can scare us," he spat. "We are the Vraxians. No one stands against us." Despite his bravado, however, a flicker of doubt crept into his mind. The size of those ships, the sheer scale of their weaponry, it was overwhelming. Even the mightiest empires in the galaxy would hesitate to engage such forces. Could the humans really possess technology capable of matching or surpassing their own? Kryn cleared his throat nervously, drawing Xylar's attention. "Commander," he began cautiously, "perhaps we should reconsider. If they're telling the truth—" "Enough!" Xylar snapped, cutting him off. "I won't let some backward species dictate terms to me. Prepare the fleet for battle. We'll show them exactly who they're dealing with." Orders rippled through the Vraxian ships as weapon systems powered up and targeting arrays locked onto the human destroyers. But even as they prepared to strike, none of them noticed the subtle shift in the humans' posture. On board the lead destroyer, Captain Elena Vasquez stood tall, her expression unreadable. She had anticipated this moment for years, training tirelessly for the day when humanity's secrets would finally come to light. "Let them make the first move," she said softly, addressing her crew. Her voice carried no trace of fear, only resolve. "And when they do, remind them why Earth is worth protecting." Back on the Zorithus, Xylar gave the order to fire. Plasma bolts streaked toward the human ships, illuminating the darkness of space. But instead of exploding into flames, the projectiles dissipated harmlessly against shimmering shields. The human destroyers remained untouched, their presence as imposing as ever. For a brief moment, awe replaced arrogance in Xylar's chest. Who were these humans really? And what else were they hiding? Little did he know, the battle had only just begun, and the Vraxians were about to learn a lesson they would never forget. The Vraxian fleet hovered uncertainly in orbit, their weapons primed but their confidence shaken. Xylar's mind raced as he tried to process what had just happened. The plasma bolts fired by his ships, weapons that had devastated countless civilizations, had been rendered useless against the humans' shields. It was like throwing pebbles at a mountain. For the first time in his life, Xylar felt doubt creeping into his thoughts. But doubt wasn't something the Vraxians tolerated for long. Anger quickly replaced it, burning hot and fierce. How dare these humans defy them? Who did they think they were, hiding behind those shimmering barriers? Xylar clenched his fists, his sharp teeth grinding together. "They're bluffing," he growled under his breath. "No one can withstand our full assault." Kryn stood nearby, visibly uneasy. He glanced at the holographic display showing the human destroyers, their sleek designs exuding power and precision. Unlike the Vraxian ships, which were jagged and menacing, the human vessels looked almost elegant, like predators lying in wait. "Commander," Kryn ventured cautiously, "perhaps we should reconsider. Their technology, it's beyond anything we've encountered before." Xylar whirled around, his glowing red eyes locking onto Kryn with a mixture of fury and disdain. "Are you questioning my orders?" he snarled. "Do you think I'm afraid of some primitive monkeys playing with toys they don't understand?" Kryn flinched but didn't back down entirely. "I'm just saying, I don't care what." "You're saying," Xylar barked, cutting him off. "We are the Vraxians. We conquer, we dominate, and we destroy anyone who stands in our way. If you're too cowardly to fight, then step aside and let someone else lead." The bridge fell silent after Xylar's outburst. No one dared challenge him further. His reputation for brutality was well known, and dissent was often met with swift punishment. Still, unease lingered among the crew. They had faced resistance before, but never like this. Never from a species that seemed so unprepared, and yet so impossibly advanced. On board the lead human destroyer, Captain Elena Vasquez watched the unfolding drama with cold detachment. She stood on the command deck, her arms crossed as she studied the Vraxian fleet through the viewport. Behind her, rows of officers worked silently at their stations, monitoring every movement of the enemy ships. The tension in the air was palpable, but Elena remained calm, her focus unwavering. "They're hesitating," said Lieutenant Marcus Hale, her second in command. He pointed to the tactical display showing the positions of the Vraxian ships. They haven't launched another attack since the shield test. Elena nodded slowly, her piercing blue eyes narrowing slightly. Good. Let them stew in their confusion. Fear is our greatest weapon right now. Hale frowned, glancing at her. You really think they'll back down? No, Elena replied flatly. They're arrogant. Arrogance blinds them to reason. They'll attack again because they can't accept being outmatched. But when they do, we'll be ready. Her words carried weight. Elena wasn't just any captain. She was one of Earth's finest strategists, hand-picked to lead humanity's secret defense force. For decades, Earth's governments had worked in secret to develop cutting-edge technology, capable of protecting the planet from extraterrestrial threats. These star destroyers were the culmination of that effort, hidden beneath layers of deception and cloaking fields until the day they were needed most. And today was that day. Back on the Zarathus, Xylar finally made his decision. Ignoring Kryn's whispered warnings, he ordered his fleet to advance. Target their engines, he commanded. Disable their propulsion systems, and we'll board their ships. Once we take control of one of their destroyers, we'll uncover their secrets and turn their own weapons against them. The Vraxian ships surged forward, their engines roaring as they closed the distance between themselves and the human fleet. Plasma cannons charged and targeting arrays locked onto the nearest destroyer. Xylar leaned forward in his chair, a cruel smile spreading across his face. Let's see how tough they are when we rip their ships apart piece by piece. But the humans weren't idle. As the Vraxians moved closer, Elena gave a single nod to her crew. Initiate countermeasures, she ordered. Deploy phase disruptors. Instantly, panels along the hulls of the human destroyers slid open, revealing rows of small cylindrical devices. With a soft hum, beams of energy shot out from these devices, creating an invisible field that enveloped the Vraxian fleet. The effect was immediate. The Vraxian ships began to shudder violently, their systems destabilizing. Alarms blared across, their bridges as navigation controls faltered and weapon systems went offline. What's happening? Xylar demanded, gripping the edges of his chair as the Zarathus rocked violently. Report. Our systems are malfunctioning, cried one of the technicians, frantically typing commands into his console. It's some kind of interference. They're disrupting our power grid. Kryn stared at the chaos unfolding around him, his heart pounding. Commander, we need to retreat. This isn't a battle we can win. Retreat? Xylar roared, spinning to face him. Never. We are Vraxians. We do not run from anyone. His words were drowned out by another explosion, this time originating from one of the smaller ships in their fleet. A bolt of energy had struck its engine core, causing it to erupt in a fiery blast. Debris scattered across space, leaving behind only silence. The loss of a single ship might have been tolerable if it weren't for what came next. From the human destroyers emerged sleek fighter craft, darting through space with incredible speed and agility. Each fighter was armed with advanced weaponry, including plasma cannons and EMP missiles designed to disable enemy systems without causing excessive collateral damage. They swarmed around the Vraxian fleet like bees attacking a predator, striking with surgical precision. One by one, the Vraxian ships fell victim to the relentless assault. Shields collapsed, hulls breached, and escape pods jettisoned into the void as crews scrambled to survive. On board the Zarathus, Xylar watched in horror as his once mighty fleet crumbled before his eyes. His arrogance had blinded him to the truth. Humanity was not the weak, divided species he had assumed. They were united, disciplined, and far more advanced than anyone could have imagined. Elena observed the carnage from her command deck, her expression unchanged. Target their flagship, she instructed calmly. Disable its weapons and prepare for boarding operations. Hale raised an eyebrow. Boarding operations, ma'am? Are you sure about that? We need answers, Elena replied simply. If we let them go now, they'll come back stronger. We need to know everything, their motives, their weaknesses, their plans. And we won't get that by blowing them to pieces. As the order spread through the fleet, a squadron of heavily armed Marines assembled near the docking bay. Clad in reinforced armor and equipped with state-of-the-art weaponry, they were ready to storm the Zorathis and capture its crew. Meanwhile, the human destroyers continued their assault, keeping the Vraxians pinned down while the boarding party prepared to strike. Back on the Zorathis, Xylar realized the situation was spiraling out of control. His pride refused to let him admit defeat, but reality was closing in fast. The human fighters had crippled most of his fleet, and now their destroyers were focusing their firepower on his flagship. Escape seemed impossible, yet surrender was unthinkable. Kryn stepped forward, his voice trembling with desperation. "Commander, please, we have to do something. If we don't act now, we're dead." Xylar hesitated, his mind racing. For all his bravado, he knew Kryn was right. Continuing the fight would only lead to annihilation. Slowly, reluctantly, he reached for the communications panel. Activating the transmitter, he spoke in a low, defeated tone. "Humans, we wish to negotiate terms of surrender." The message echoed through the comm system, reaching Elena's ears moments later. She allowed herself a faint smile, though her expression remained otherwise unreadable. Turning to Hale, she gave a final order. "Accept their surrender, but make sure they understand this clearly. Any attempt to return will result in their complete destruction." With that, the battle ended. Not with a bang, but with the crushing weight of humility. The Vraxians, conquerors of countless worlds, had been brought to their knees by a species they had dismissed as insignificant. And as the survivors limped away from Earth's orbit, they carried with them a lesson they would never forget. Humanity was no longer prey, it was predator. For Elena and her crew, the victory was bittersweet. They had proven Earth's strength, but they also knew this was just the beginning. Space was vast, and there were countless threats lurking in the darkness. Yet, as Elena gazed out at the stars, she felt a quiet sense of pride. Humanity had risen to the challenge, standing tall against overwhelming odds. Whatever the future held, they would face it together, and they would prevail. The Vraxian flagship, Zorathis, drifted helplessly in space, its engines sputtering and its shields flickering like a dying flame. Inside the command center, chaos reigned. Crew members scrambled to repair damaged systems while others worked frantically to stabilize life support. The air was thick with smoke from burnt circuits, and the metallic tang of fear hung over everyone. For the first time in their lives, the Vraxians felt truly vulnerable. Xylar sat rigidly in his chair, his glowing red eyes fixed on the holographic display showing the human fleet surrounding them. His jaw tightened as he watched the sleek destroyers move with calculated precision, circling his crippled ship like predators closing in for the kill. He had underestimated humanity, and now that mistake threatened to cost him everything. Not just his fleet, but his pride, his reputation, and perhaps even his life. Kryn stood nearby, visibly shaken. His hands trembled as he clutched a data pad filled with damage reports. "Commander," he stammered, "our weapons are offline, our shields are down to 10%, and we're losing oxygen levels in several sections. If we don't act soon—" "Enough!" Xylar snapped, cutting him off. His voice thundered through the bridge, silencing everyone around him. "We are Vraxians. We do not surrender. We fight until the end." But even as he spoke those words, doubt gnawed at him. This wasn't just another skirmish. This was annihilation staring him in the face. The humans hadn't just outmatched them. They had dismantled the Vraxian fleet piece by piece, exposing every weakness and exploiting every flaw. Their technology was beyond anything Xylar had ever encountered, and their tactics were flawless. It was clear now that humanity wasn't some primitive species waiting to be conquered. They were warriors, strategists, survivors. On board the lead human destroyer, Captain Elena Vasquez watched the unfolding scene with steely determination. She stood tall on the command deck, her arms crossed as she surveyed the tactical display, showing the remnants of the Vraxian fleet. Most of their ships were either destroyed or disabled, leaving only the flagship intact, and even that was barely holding together. "They're broadcasting again," reported Lieutenant Marcus Hale, leaning over his console. "It's a distress signal." Elena raised an eyebrow. "Let me guess, they're asking for mercy?" Hale nodded grimly. Something like that. They claim they're willing to negotiate terms of surrender. A faint smile tugged at the corner of Elena's lips, though it didn't reach her eyes. Negotiate after what they've done? She turned to face her crew, her voice firm and commanding. Prepare boarding parties. I want teams ready to storm the Zarathus. Secure any surviving crew members and gather intel on their technology and motives. And tell them this: if anyone resists, they'll regret it. Her orders rippled through the ship, sending squads of heavily armed Marines rushing toward the docking bay. Clad in reinforced armor and equipped with advanced weaponry, these soldiers were among Earth's finest. Trained to operate in zero gravity and prepared for close-quarters combat, they moved with practiced efficiency, each step purposeful and deliberate. As the boarding party prepared to launch, Elena turned her attention back to the main viewport. Through the thick glass, she could see the battered hull of the Zarathus, its once imposing silhouette now marred by scorch marks and structural damage. It was hard to believe that such a formidable force had been reduced to this, a broken shell of its former self. They thought they could walk all over us, she murmured softly, almost to herself. They thought we'd roll over and die without a fight. Her expression hardened. They were wrong. Meanwhile, aboard the Zarathus, Xyler struggled to maintain control of his crew. Panic spread like wildfire as the reality of their situation sank in. Escape pods continued to jettison into space, carrying terrified crew members who preferred the uncertainty of drifting in the void to facing the wrath of the humans. We can't give up, Xyler barked, slamming his fist onto the console. If we surrender now, we disgrace ourselves and our people. Is that what you want? To be remembered as cowards? His words did little to inspire confidence. Many of the crew exchanged uneasy glances, their instincts screaming at them to flee. Kryn stepped forward hesitantly, his voice trembling. Commander, maybe surrender isn't dishonor. Maybe it's survival. If we cooperate, they might let us live. Xyler spun around, his eyes blazing with fury. Survival? You call begging for your life survival? No Vraxian surrenders. Not to anyone, especially not to humans. Kryn flinched but stood his ground. Then what do you suggest we do? Fight with our bare hands? Our weapons are useless, our shields are gone, and half the crew has already abandoned ship. We're finished, Commander. Admit it. For a moment, silence fell over the bridge. Xyler stared at Kryn, his chest rising and falling rapidly as he fought to contain his emotions. Finally, he slumped back into his chair, his shoulders sagging under the weight of defeat. Fine, he muttered bitterly. Send the message. Tell them we surrender. Kryn exhaled sharply, relief washing over him. He quickly relayed the order to the communications officer, who broadcasted the message across all frequencies. To the human fleet, the transmission began. We acknowledge your superiority and offer unconditional surrender. Please spare our remaining crew. Back on the human destroyer, Elena listened to the message with a mixture of satisfaction and caution. She knew better than to trust the Vraxians completely. Even in defeat, they could still pose a threat. Turning to Hale, she gave a final set of instructions. Tell the boarding teams to proceed with extreme caution. Assume there's resistance until proven otherwise. And make sure they secure Xyler personally. I want that bastard alive. Yes, ma'am, Hale replied, relaying the orders immediately. Moments later, the boarding craft detached from the human destroyer and sped toward the Zarathus. As they approached, grappling hooks extended from the vessels, latching onto the alien ship's hull. With a hiss of pressurized air, the boarding ramps extended and the Marines poured inside, weapons drawn. The interior of the Zarathus was dimly lit, the emergency lights casting eerie shadows along the corridors. Smoke billowed from damaged panels and sparks rained down from exposed wires. The Marines moved swiftly, sweeping each section of the ship with methodical precision. Resistance was minimal. Most of the surviving crew had already surrendered, raising their hands in surrender as the humans advanced. In the command center, Xyler waited stoically, his arms crossed as the Marines stormed in. When they surrounded him, he glared defiantly, refusing to show fear. One of the soldiers stepped forward, pointing his weapon directly at Xylar's chest. "You're coming with us," he growled. Xylar sneered, but said nothing. He allowed himself to be escorted out of the room, his pride shattered, but his spirit unbroken. As he passed through the corridors of his ruined ship, he couldn't help but marvel at the efficiency of the human forces. Every movement was coordinated, every action deliberate. These were no ordinary soldiers. They were professionals trained to perfection. By the time the boarding operation was complete, the Zarathis had been thoroughly secured. Surviving crew members were rounded up and placed under guard while engineers began extracting valuable data from the ship's computers. Back on the human destroyer, Elena reviewed the initial reports with quiet satisfaction. "Well done," she said to Hale, who stood beside her. "This is far from over, though. We need to analyze everything we've gathered: technology, tactics, intentions. The more we know about them, the better prepared we'll be for whatever comes next." Hale nodded, his expression serious. "Do you think they'll come back?" Elena's gaze shifted to the viewport, where the stars twinkled endlessly against the blackness of space. "Of course they will," she replied softly. "Species like the Vraxians don't forget humiliation easily. But when they return, they'll find us stronger, smarter, and ready for them." Her words carried weight, echoing through the command deck. Humanity had won the battle, but the war was far from over. Space was vast, and Earth was just one small planet in an infinite galaxy. Yet, as Elena gazed out at the endless expanse, she felt a sense of resolve. Whatever challenges lay ahead, humanity would face them head-on, and they would prevail. For now, however, the immediate threat had been neutralized. The Vraxians had been defeated, their arrogance shattered, and their fleet reduced to rubble. As the human destroyers began their journey back to Earth, the message was clear. Humanity was no longer prey. It was predator, and woe to any species foolish enough to underestimate them again. The human destroyers drifted silently through space, their sleek hulls gleaming faintly under the distant light of a dying star. Inside the lead destroyer, Captain Elena Vasquez stood on the command deck, her sharp eyes scanning the tactical display. The remnants of the Vraxian fleet were secured, most of their ships disabled or destroyed, and their flagship Zorathis now firmly under human control. Yet despite the victory, Elena felt no sense of triumph. There was still work to be done, pieces to analyze, lessons to learn. This wasn't just about defeating an enemy. It was about ensuring humanity's survival in a galaxy teeming with threats. In the detention bay, Xylar sat alone in a containment cell, his glowing red eyes fixed on the transparent barrier separating him from the rest of the ship. The once proud Vraxian commander looked smaller now, stripped of his armor and weapons, reduced to nothing more than a prisoner. His hands were cuffed with energy restraints designed to suppress his strength, but even so, he radiated defiance. He refused to speak, refusing to acknowledge the humans who occasionally passed by to observe him. Pride was all he had left, and he clung to it fiercely. Elena entered the detention bay moments later, flanked by 2 armed guards. She stopped in front of Xylar's cell, her arms crossed as she studied him with clinical detachment. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Then Elena broke the silence. "You led your people into a slaughter," she said calmly, her voice devoid of anger or pity. "Why?" Xylar's eyes flicked toward her, narrowing slightly. "You think I'll answer your questions?" he spat. "I'd rather die than give you the satisfaction." Elena didn't flinch. She had expected this reaction. Arrogance was a trait common among species like the Vraxians, species that thrived on domination and conquest. But arrogance could also be a weakness, especially when coupled with fear. And right now, Xylar was afraid, whether he admitted it or not. "I'm not asking for your cooperation," Elena continued, her tone measured. "I already have everything I need. Your ship's database is being analyzed as we speak. Every tactic, every weapon blueprint, every classified file, you've handed us everything without firing a shot." She paused, letting her words sink in before adding, "But I'm curious. What made you think Earth would be easy prey? Did you really believe we'd roll over and let you take what you wanted? Xylar clenched his jaw, his fists tightening against the cuffs. Your kind always does, he muttered bitterly. Every planet we've encountered has been weak, divided, powerless. You're no different. Elena raised an eyebrow. And yet, here we are, still standing. For a moment, Xylar looked away, his expression unreadable. When he finally spoke again, his voice carried a hint of grudging respect. You hid well, he admitted reluctantly. We never saw your ships until it was too late. We never suspected this. That's the point, Elena replied. Humanity isn't what it appears to be. To outsiders, we look chaotic, disorganized, vulnerable. But beneath the surface, we've been preparing for days like this, for centuries even. We've learned to adapt, to innovate, to survive. And today you learned why messing with Earth is a mistake. Xylar didn't respond immediately. Instead, he leaned back against the wall of his cell, his gaze dropping to the floor. For the first time since his capture, there was no trace of defiance in his posture, only resignation. Defeat weighed heavily on him, not just because of the loss of his fleet, but because of the realization that humanity wasn't some primitive species waiting to be conquered. They were equals, or worse, superiors. Meanwhile, in the engineering bay, teams of scientists and technicians worked tirelessly to dissect the technology recovered from the Vraxian ships. The alien vessels were a treasure trove of advanced systems, many of which far surpassed anything humanity had developed. Plasma cannons, cloaking devices, hyperdrive engines. The list went on. Each discovery brought new possibilities, new opportunities to strengthen Earth's defenses. Dr. Rachel Kim, the head of the research team, stood at the center of the chaos, her clipboard in hand as she directed her colleagues. Careful with that core, she called out, pointing to a pulsating orb suspended in midair by magnetic clamps. If it destabilizes, we could lose half the ship. One of the engineers nodded nervously, adjusting the settings on the containment field. Got it, Doctor, but what exactly are we looking for here? Everything, Rachel replied firmly. We need to understand how their technology works, not just to replicate it, but to improve upon it. If we can integrate their advancements with our own systems, we'll have a fighting chance against whatever else is out there. Her words resonated deeply with everyone in the room. This wasn't just about reverse engineering alien tech, it was about staying one step ahead. The Vraxians might have been defeated, but they weren't the only threat lurking in the galaxy. Somewhere beyond the stars, other species were watching, waiting, planning. Humanity couldn't afford to grow complacent. As the hours passed, breakthroughs began to emerge. One team successfully decrypted part of the Vraxian database, uncovering detailed schematics of their weaponry. Another managed to stabilize a sample of their plasma fuel, opening the door to developing more efficient energy sources. By the end of the day, the entire crew buzzed with excitement, their morale boosted by the knowledge that they were making progress. Back on the bridge, Elena reviewed the latest updates with Lieutenant Marcus Hale. It looks like the research teams are making good use of their time, she remarked, scrolling through the reports on her tablet. They've identified several key technologies that could give us an edge in future engagements. Hale nodded approvingly. Good news, ma'am. But what about the prisoners? Do we keep them on board or send them packing? Elena hesitated, considering the question carefully. Keeping the Vraxians as captives posed risks. They were unpredictable, potentially dangerous, but releasing them came with its own set of challenges. If they returned to their homeworld, they might rally reinforcements and launch another attack. On the other hand, holding them indefinitely could spark diplomatic complications if other species got involved. We'll interrogate them further, Elena decided after a moment. Extract as much information as possible about their empire, their allies, their enemies. Once we know everything they know, we'll make our decision. Hale frowned slightly. Do you think they'll talk? They will, Elena replied confidently. Fear has a way of loosening tongues, and, besides. She glanced at the viewport, where the battered remains of the Vraxian fleet floated, silently in the void. They don't have much choice. Hours later, deep within the bowels of the destroyer, a group of interrogators convened in a secure chamber. Xylar sat at the center of the room, his wrists still bound by energy. Cuffs. Surrounding him were 3 human officers, each armed with tools designed to extract information without causing permanent harm. It wasn't torture. It was psychology, leveraging fear and uncertainty to break down resistance. "Let's try this again," one of the officers said, leaning forward slightly. "Tell us about your empire. How many fleets do you have? Where are your colonies located?" Xylar glared at him, his lips pressed into a thin line. "I told you, I won't say a word." The officer sighed, feigning disappointment. "That's unfortunate, because if you don't cooperate, we'll start dismantling your ship piece by piece. Every secret you've kept hidden, all those weapons, those engines, those shields, they'll become ours. And then when we're finished, we'll release you back into space. Alone." Xylar's eyes widened slightly, though he tried to mask his reaction. Being stranded in the void was a fate worse than death for any Vraxian. Their species thrived on conquest, on power. To be cast adrift, helpless and forgotten, was unthinkable. Still, he held his ground. "You won't get anything from me," he insisted, though his voice wavered slightly. The officer smiled faintly. "We'll see." By the time the interrogation ended, Xylar had revealed fragments of valuable information. Details about the structure of the Vraxian Empire, hints about their military strategy, warnings about rival factions. It wasn't everything, but it was enough to give humanity a clearer picture of the galactic landscape. As the data was compiled and analyzed, Elena addressed her crew over the intercom. "Today we proved something important," she said, her voice steady and resolute. "We proved that humanity is capable of standing toe-to-toe with any species in the galaxy. But let's not forget, this is just the beginning. Space is vast, and danger lurks around every corner. Our job isn't done. Stay vigilant, stay united, and remember why we're here." Her words echoed through the ship, inspiring confidence and resolve. The battle against the Vraxians had been won, but the war for Earth's place in the universe was far from over. Humanity had taken its first step onto the galactic stage, and it was determined to stay there. For Xylar and his surviving crew, the future was uncertain. They had been humbled, broken, and stripped of their pride. As they prepared to leave, the human destroyer escorted to a small transport vessel that would carry them away from Earth. Xylar couldn't help but glance back at the towering starships looming above him. These humans had proven themselves stronger, smarter, and more resourceful than anyone could have imagined. And as the transport disappeared into the darkness of space, Xylar vowed silently that he would never underestimate humanity again. The transport vessel carrying Xylar and the surviving Vraxians drifted silently through space, its engines humming softly as it moved farther away from Earth's orbit. Inside, the atmosphere was heavy with defeat. The once proud warriors of the Vraxian Empire sat in silence, their heads bowed, their spirits crushed. For them, this wasn't just a loss. It was a humiliation that would echo across generations. They had come to Earth expecting an easy victory, only to be met with overwhelming resistance. Now, as they stared out at the endless void, they couldn't shake the memory of those towering star destroyers emerging from behind Earth's sky. Xylar sat apart from the others, his glowing red eyes fixed on the viewport. His mind replayed the events of the past few days, the arrogance that had blinded him, the underestimation of humanity, and the ultimate downfall of his fleet. He clenched his fists tightly, his pride refusing to let him accept responsibility for the disaster. Instead, he focused on one thought: revenge. Someday, somehow, he would return to Earth, and when he did, he would make humanity pay for what they had done. But deep down, even Xylar knew that day might never come. The humans weren't like other species. They were disciplined, innovative, and united. Their technology rivaled, if not surpassed, anything the Vraxians possessed. And worst of all, they had something the Vraxians lacked: resilience. Humanity didn't crumble under pressure. It adapted, grew stronger, and fought back harder. As much as Xylar hated to admit it, Earth was no longer a target. It was a fortress. Back on Earth, news of the victory spread quickly. Governments around the world released carefully curated footage of the battle, showcasing humanity's triumph against the alien invaders. Cities erupted in celebration, with people flooding the streets to cheer and wave flags. Fireworks lit up the night. Skies and speeches praising the bravery of the human defenders echoed through public squares. For the first time in history, nations put aside their differences to focus on a common goal: protecting their home. Captain Elena Vasquez stood on the balcony of a high-rise building, watching the festivities unfold below. Her expression remained calm, almost detached, despite the joy surrounding her. To the public, she was a hero, a symbol of humanity's strength and determination. But Elena knew better than anyone that this victory came at a cost. Lives had been lost, resources depleted, and countless hours spent preparing for a war that could have ended very differently. This wasn't a moment to celebrate recklessly. It was a moment to reflect and prepare for what lay ahead. "Do you think they realize how close we came to losing?" Marcus Hale asked, joining her on the balcony. His tone was quiet, thoughtful, as though he too felt uneasy amidst the jubilation. Elena shook her head slightly. "Most of them don't," she replied. "And maybe that's for the best. People need hope right now. They need to believe we can handle whatever comes next." Hale nodded, leaning against the railing. "Still, it's hard not to feel unprepared. We got lucky this time. What happens when the next threat shows up? Or the one after that?" "We'll adapt," Elena said firmly. "That's what humanity does. Every challenge makes us stronger, smarter, more capable. The Vraxians underestimated us because they saw chaos where there was unity, weakness where there was strength. We use that to our advantage, and we'll do it again if we have to." Her words carried conviction, but there was also a note of caution in her voice. Space was vast, and Earth was just one small planet in an infinite galaxy. The Vraxians were only the beginning. There were countless other species out there, some peaceful, others hostile. Humanity had proven it could defend itself, but survival required more than just military strength. It required innovation, diplomacy, and above all, unity. In the weeks that followed, Earth underwent a transformation. The secrets uncovered from the Vraxian ships sparked a technological revolution unlike anything the world had ever seen. Scientists worked around the clock to integrate alien advancements with human systems, creating new weapons, faster engines, and more efficient energy sources. Factories churned out upgraded starships while training programs prepared soldiers for zero-gravity combat. Humanity wasn't just rebuilding, it was evolving. Dr. Rachel Kim led the charge in reverse engineering, the Vraxian technology. Her team discovered groundbreaking applications for plasma-based weaponry, allowing Earth's forces to develop weapons capable of rivaling, or even surpassing, their former enemies. "This changes everything," she told her colleagues during a briefing. "With these upgrades, we won't just be defending ourselves. We'll be ready to strike back if necessary." The implications were clear. Humanity was no longer content to wait for threats to come to them. If another species dared to invade, Earth would meet them head-on, taking the fight to their doorstep. It was a bold strategy, but one born out of necessity. In a universe filled with predators, Earth had become a predator in its own right. Meanwhile, aboard the transport vessel, Xylar and his crew finally reached a remote outpost on the edge of Vraxian-controlled space. The outpost was little more than a collection of dilapidated structures and rusting ships, a far cry from the grandeur of their empire's core worlds. Still, it offered refuge and a chance to regroup. As Xylar stepped off the transport, he was greeted by a group of Vraxian officials who had been monitoring the situation. Their expressions ranged from shock to disbelief as they listened to his account of the battle. When he finished speaking, the room fell silent. No one dared to interrupt or question him, not yet. Finally, one of the officials spoke up. You're saying humans possess technology equal to ours? Better, Xyler corrected grimly. Their ships, their weapons, their tactics, they're unmatched. And worse, they're unified. Unlike us, they don't waste time fighting among themselves. They work together, plan together, fight together. The official frowned deeply. Then what do you propose we do? Attack again? With what fleet? Xyler hesitated, his gaze dropping to the floor. He wanted to argue, to demand reinforcements and launch another assault. But reality weighed heavily on him. Attacking Earth again would require more than just ships and weapons. It would require a fundamental shift in how the Vraxians operated. Arrogance had been their undoing, and unless they changed their ways, they would face the same fate again. For now, Xyler admitted reluctantly, we leave them alone. But mark my words, we will return. And when we do, we'll be ready. Months passed, and the galaxy settled into an uneasy peace. News of Earth's victory spread far beyond the borders of the Vraxian Empire, striking fear into the hearts of other would-be invaders, species that had once dismissed humanity as weak and insignificant now viewed Earth with wary respect. Rumors circulated about the mysterious star destroyers hidden beneath Earth's sky, waiting to emerge whenever danger approached. Some called it a miracle, others called it a warning. Either way, the message was clear. Earth was not to be trifled with. For Elena and her crew, life returned to a semblance of normalcy, but only on the surface. Beneath the calm exterior, preparations continued. New fleets were assembled, new strategies devised. Humanity had proven it could defend itself, but Elena knew the real test was still to come. Space was vast and danger lurked around every corner. The Vraxians might have been defeated, but they were just one piece of a much larger puzzle. One evening, as Elena stood on the bridge of her destroyer, gazing out at the stars, Marcus approached her. "Do you ever wonder what's out there?" he asked, nodding toward the viewport. "Beyond the Vraxians, beyond our solar system, what else is waiting for us?" Elena smiled faintly, her eyes reflecting the distant light of a billion suns. "I wonder all the time," she admitted. "But I'm not afraid. Whatever's out there, we'll face it, together." Her words carried weight, echoing through the ship like a promise. Humanity had taken its first step onto the galactic stage, and though the journey ahead was uncertain, one thing was clear. Earth was no longer prey, it was predator, and woe to any species foolish enough to underestimate it again.